would you tell people about this? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to the show. This is Dapper Reacts to Things. What is this, like 5 or 6? I don't even know anymore. It's a number. It's on the title. You can see it. I can't because it's truncated on my end, but that's okay. I'm here, of course, with Vishanti, who is my most frequent guest on Dapper Reacts to Things. Vishanti, how are you?
I'm doing great. I've been listening to Metallica all morning, like old school thrash metal Metallica, so I'm doing great. I'm super hyped.
I have also been doing some of that too. I've been doing some of that. I've been doing a little bit of listening to some books on tape that were kindly gifted to me by Dr. Dan Stern Cardinal in his ongoing effort to make sure that everyone he knows has read all of Brandon Sanderson's fantasy novels. So I've been doing a little bit of that. I played a little bit of video games. And I want to give a quick couple announcements. One is, if you look at the pinned chat up at the top of the chat log right there, you will see a link to a YouTube video that I did with Now Pinion, who is in the chat. And so Now Pinion is a father-daughter team, and I did an interview with them, heads up, because of a problem with my audio, or well, with the recording of my audio. My voice has been replaced by an AI facsimile of me. And while it sounds a whole lot like me in terms of the actual quality of the voice, it has essentially no intonations, so it sounds like I've sort of like been turned into a robot. So, you know, there you go.
You did stream this week as a like Mechazord, so
That's true, yeah. But I
it
had
was
my
just that
full
version of you.
I had my full range though of like, tones and emotion. Although I guess I'm not a super animated guy even when I'm even normally. But anyway, yeah, do please check that out. It was a fun interview to give. It's a fun interview to watch. I think I've seen it twice now already. But also, at 3, I'm going to be going on Top Hats Off to stream some Oxygen Not Included, because that was kindly gifted to me by Tin Soldier. So I want to say thank you very much to Tin Soldier. And so I will be streaming a few hours of that. So probably about 2. I don't know. If I have enough fun, I might go longer. So if you want to do that, that link should be in the description later. I might ask one of my mods to grab it. Maybe after like the halfway point of this. But Shanti, do you remember what we were talking about last time we were here? It's been a few weeks.
Not a clue.
Okay, that's fair. So because this series is irregular, it's hard to keep track of, but we have been talking about why it is that geology apparently is a disaster for evolutionary biology and, well, geology, which is a little bit weird that geology would be a disaster for geology, but it's apparently the theme of this talk. And specifically, we are about to hear about transitional species and transitional forms in the fossil record. So are you ready to hear some more of that?
No, but let's do it.
Okay.
But he predicted that although he could not point to the fossils during his day, that the fossils did exist and would be found. The question is, have they been found?
Yes.
Yeah, I do think that they've been found.
Can they connect together these various types of animals or plants
Yes.
by way of transitional forms?
I mean, not every single group to every other group, but by and large, yeah.
Well, the answer to that is no.
Oh,
They've been searching for 150 years to fill in these gaps
Survey says
by way of fossil
quaker.
forms, and they have not found them.
weird, because it looks like we're seeing a whole bunch of them. I don't know.
James Valentine is an evolutionary biologist at California University, and he makes this confession in What Darwin Began. He says, "The fossil record is of little use in providing direct evidence of the pathways of descent of the phyla or of invertebrate classes."
Yeah, so it's a little weird there, because actually since then we've found stem members of most phyla. Well, not most like large-bodied animal phyla. Some phyla are so small that you're not expecting to even find fossils of them, like what do you call them? Rotifers. Whole phylum of animals. Never found a single fossil up until like way into the Cenozoic. Does that mean they didn't exist before like the Pleistocene? Probably not. They probably did not evolve in the Pleistocene. But yeah.
Now, phyla, just so you know, are taxonomic groups like those represented on this slide. The cnidarians represented by, for example, your jellyfish.
Yep. We're just going to make sure he gets all of these right? So we're looking for cnidarian, echinoderm, mollusk, and arthropod. Okay, so we're going to see. If he gets anything wrong, we'll make fun of him for trying to give a talk about this. I actually think he'll get them right. What do you think?
I doubt it.
Okay. I have more faith in our creationist here than Vishanti does, which, I mean, I can't blame her for, right? it's very hard to be disappointed by creationists, and yet it happens all the time anyway.
The echinoderms, which are represented by the starfish, the mollusks represented by the clam, and or the arthropods represented by your trilobite there.
Saying and/or is a little bit weird because it implies that the clam might also be an arthropod, but if we go ahead and say that that was like 4.75 because of the and/or. 4.75 out of 5. Does that seem fair?
I'm very much in agreement with what Misty says in the chat, is that they're quoting people from decades ago saying there aren't enough fossils. In this case, he's quoting someone from well over 150 years ago.
Yeah, saying...
And I'm like, my man, if you want to quote somebody 150 years ago and be like, why don't we see any fossils? And then make that the basis of your argument, I think you may have picked the wrong thing to cite.
Yeah, it's almost like there are transitional fossils, and that it's actually pretty obvious we have transitional fossils for things like different groups of cephalopods, for basal mollusks into the more derived mollusks like bivalves and cephalopods and gastropods. Like, we have different transitional groups between things like basal, different groups of, what we generally call fish, but into, more derived ones. Tetrapods emerging from other sarcopterygians, between different groups of dinosaurs, different synapsids, turtles, snakes.
I like turtles.
Well, everyone likes turtles. But different archosaurs into dinosaurs, into actual I can't speak. Ornithischians, basal thyreophorans, birds, synapsids going into mammals, among the mammals, like, things like artiodactyls or primates or, whales, even sirenians or, seals, things like that, horses, I don't know, lots of stuff.
I mean, look at the screen, though. He's quoting a book from 1985.
Well, they can't see the screen right now because I played the transitional fossil slideshow.
Oh, okay. Damn, I should have been yodeling this whole time.
Basically, every time I was mentioning a group, it's because they were on screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, yes, I'm sure that in 1985, we had fewer obvious transitional fossils. But here's a cool thing, right? The pace of discovery of new fossil taxa, has been increasing for about 20 years now. So we're finding more and more things faster and faster. In fact, right now, I believe that on average, just with dinosaurs, which is, the part I pay the most attention to, just dinosaurs, about one new genus is described every single week, which is why there's no way I'm ever going to keep up with it, right? There's no way I'm going to learn about 52 new genera a year. It's just not going to happen. So, yeah, I'm sure that in 1985, the situation was significantly different. But that was like, 36 years ago? I can't do math.
37.
37? There you go. Yeah. I'm not old. You're old.
Dude, I'm not old. You're old.
Well, I am 150 million years old, so yeah, that's fair.
There you go.
All right, here we go.
These are the various phyla that he's talking about.
Well, those are phyla, but the thing is, do we have stem mollusks? And the answer is, well, yeah, we do. We have things from the Ediacaran that look like mollusks, but aren't quite within the crown group of mollusks, and so that's a transitional group for the whole mollusk phylum. Do we have stem arthropods? We have stem arthropods from both probable stem arthropods from the Ediacaran as well as into the Cambrian. So we know that they have evolutionary relatives that are transitional to the trilobite form. We even have them between things like modern lobopodians, things like velvet worms, into arthropods. We have the very close to arthropods, stem arthropods like radiodonts or opabinia. With jellyfish, it's a little bit trickier because they're very rare to preserve. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, they're very difficult to preserve, being that they're so soft and squishy.
They're even harder to cook.
I don't doubt it. I was gonna say the side chat's kind of debating over whether or not creationism or creation on its own is really a substantial way to explain geology and all the things that we see. And kind of where I'm at on that whole thing, it's like people constantly trying to harmonize creationism, whether it's old Earth or young Earth, with whatever their, I guess, religious model is. And I'm like, guys, honestly, creationism is just three God of the Gaps arguments in a trench coat trying to pretend to sneak into geology. And
a whole lot of other things too.
yeah, it's just there's too many problems. It comes down to God of the Gaps. Anything that you can't explain with creationism, well, God did it. Or
Plus,
anytime there's a contradiction with, the mainstream scientific consensus, well, God could have done it this way this one time, this special, magic trick.
That's the part that I care even more about, because quite honestly, if you just want to go with the God of the Gaps, then I'm just going to say, all right, well, have fun when the gap gets filled. Right?
Right.
But the thing is, creationism likes to pretend that there are gaps where there aren't. It's like, oh, we can't really explain how old the Earth is. No, we can. It's definitely not as old as you say it is. No, but look at all these problems. Nope, those aren't problems. Or the ones that are have already been solved.
I think I'm still salty because of a dialogue I heard yesterday from I don't want to say he's a young Earth creationist, but everything that he was saying is the same things that young Earth creationists say, and he was just coming down to this old, well, how do we know anything? How do we know we're real? And it's like, dude, this is not productive.
You know what? If you want to go into, hard solipsism, have fun. I'm just not going to be in that
That's what he was doing. It was just solipsism dressed up as Christian philosophy, and I think the entire group of people that were watching it were just collectively, smashing their face into their keyboards.
Yeah. All right. Well, I also want to point out that when it comes to echinoderms, we also have stem echinoderms, and usually they're just termed echinoderms, but we actually have things that are bilaterally symmetrical, but otherwise have the same type of anatomy that you see in things like brittle stars or sea stars. So all of these things, with the exception of the jellyfish, which, as we said, there's a pretty strong taxonomic bias against preserving jellyfish, we have known either relatives or antecedents in the fossil record. So, it's just a lie to say that we don't have any transitional fossils for the phyla as a whole.
Also, Marinin, sorry, is saying that they don't have a problem with science, really. It's just the animal-human evolution. Well, humans are animals.
Yeah, animal-human evolution is sort of like saying, mammal-dog evolution. Doesn't, yeah, dogs are mammals, and they did come from previous mammals, but, it's a weird way to put it.
Because
we're
saying
I have a reptile
not
lizard.
Plants. We're not bacteria. We're not fungi. So we're not viruses.
Well,
in the biological sense.
Some people act like viruses.
Some people act like viruses, but
all right. Also,
that basically just leaves animals. So
this is also a weird argument, because this is an old Earth argument, right? That actually accepts a certain degree of common ancestry. This is like the Stephen Meyer intelligent design argument, where okay, well, look, a lot of evolution probably happened over the course of history, but the phyla are so distinct and they appear so abruptly that they must have been each individually miraculously created. Which, okay, gets you to a creator, which is a creator that I think is broadly compatible with, say, Christianity, which is the goal of most of the people proposing it. But it doesn't get you to humans are a separate creation from, say, chimpanzees, which is what this guy wants to do. So I'm curious to see where this will go.
Within these phyla are numerous classes. So within the mollusks, represented by the clam there's also cephalopods, which includes the octopus and squid, and you also have gastropods, which includes the snails.
And the slugs, although slugs are not a monophyletic group, they're just individual groups of snails that have independently lost their shells, so whatever, it's fine.
Okay, several different classes in each of these phyla. Okay, but one thing is clear, one thing is pretty obvious here, that these phyla are about as different from one another as animals could possibly be.
See, that's actually not entirely true.
So
let's see. So we'll use the examples right here, right? So we have a starfish, which I prefer to call them sea stars, but whatever, because they're not fish, but who cares, right? You guys, anyone in here who didn't
No,
know
it's
that
Patrick.
anyone in here who didn't know that a starfish isn't a vertebrate, now you know. There you go. That's why it's a little inappropriate to call them fish, but we're going to move past it. Okay, so the starfish, the clam, and the trilobite are all similar in a particular way. One is they're all bilaterians. Now you might say, hey, hold up. That starfish is radially symmetrical. You're right. However, if you look at the ontology of a starfish, that is, as it goes from a fertilized egg all the way to an adult, it has a free-swimming larval form that is, in fact, bilaterally symmetrical. And then one half of it actually starts to atrophy away, and the other half grows around into a circle that then creates the radial pattern. Which is bizarre, but it's also why we would predict that we would find adult echinoderm-like animals in the fossil record that are bilaterally symmetrical as adults. And we do. So, all three of these on the right have that in common, whereas the jellyfish, being an idarian, has a radial symmetry. So already the jellyfish is the odd man out, right? But then we can say, okay, of the starfish, the clam, and the trilobite, which one is the odd man out here? We can say, okay, well, the starfish, uncommon with humans, as well as acorn worms and every other vertebrate that you've ever met, have, when they develop, the blastopore, which is the first little indentation that forms in the embryo, is going to form the anus. Now, as an adult, starfish have a blind gut, but as larvae, they have a through gut, and the anus is what forms first, which makes them deuterostomes, whereas in the clam and the trilobite, the blastopore forms the mouth, making them protostomes. So it's not the case that these are all as different from each other as they can be. In fact, the starfish groups with the clam and the trilobite, and then among those three, the clam and the trilobite group together to the exclusion of the starfish. We can make a nested hierarchy right here. So
I can't stop thinking about clams from the Z Frank video. Clams are dumb as hell.
I mean, they do have tiny, tiny brains. Actually, I don't really think they have a technical brain. Anyway, here we go.
And they are separated by enormous gaps. In addition, when these animals that we see here, like jellyfish, when they first appear in the fossil record, it's a perfectly formed jellyfish.
What would be an imperfectly formed jellyfish?
This is the thing that gets me about a lot of these. Oh, they're perfectly formed. We just see them pop into the fossil record fully formed. I'm like, dude, you're not gonna find, quote, imperfectly formed. Does he expect it to be a weird crossbreed between a jellyfish and something else?
Yeah, that's the question that I don't understand. Like, what is a half-formed jellyfish? Is it like a jellyfish that's melted? Is it a jellyfish that looks like it's like got sponge parts as part of its body? Because sponges are like, probably the most or the next to most basically branching member of the rest of Animalia. Like, what is the prediction?
Do they only have super tiny little tendrils there? Or they instead of the long, flowy ones?
So what I would like, creationists, so that I know what you're expecting to see.
And I know that they can't be referring to the, polyp stage.
Yeah. Well, because that would just look like a fully formed, coral or an anemone, right? Because that's basically what they look like. Yeah, I don't know. Balin Philotico says it's just half of a jellyfish, but is that the left half? Like cut down from...
Is it the left half?
Yeah, it's it's split left and right, although, you can't find a left and right. Or is it top and bottom? It's just...
it's the top.
It's just the mantle. Yeah, it's just the bell, right? And there's no tentacles. And then later on, you get tentacles with no bell. And then slowly they merge together and they form a whole jellyfish. Yeah. I don't... also, someone... I'm not sure where it was. Sir Equinox said, aren't jellyfish colony creatures? There are colonial medusal cnidarians. They're usually not called jellyfish, but there are some. However, most medusas that you see like this one are not colonial. There's a single individual organism right there. So that's something that's going to vary by taxon, basically. I believe the man of war is a cnidarian that is, in fact, colonial. Although
Drew in the side chat did type that. Hydrozoans like Portuguese man of war.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, don't lick them.
No. As a general rule, don't lick wild animals. That's just usually a bad idea. I would say, generally speaking, most things that are just out in the world probably shouldn't be licked, like telephone
Unless
poles,
you want that
doorknobs.
to be the last and only thing that you lick.
Yeah. Yeah. If you really feel like you need to lick something, there are designated things like go get yourself like a bit of candy or something. Yeah, things are things like food safe. You know. Anyway, here we go.
There's no indication what evolved into the jellyfish. The first time we find them, they're perfectly formed jellyfish.
I mean, that's basically true, but then like we said, it's hard to imagine how we would be likely to get what are probably the extremely tiny and very soft-bodied jellyfish fossils.
Find a formed, like, perfect Australopithecine.
Yeah, why does it? Shouldn't it have only like 2 limbs? If you know, or
And
like
not as
half
many
a face?
toes. Like what?
Yeah.
No indication what evolved.
Are they? Okay, hold on. We're gonna double check on this. So we're gonna go with bilateral motors because I don't remember all the names. Okay, so let's see if I can pull up. Yeah, here we go. Ooh. It is Tenoimbricata. There it is, Tenoimbricata. Alright, so we're gonna quickly switch which scene we're on. Give me a second, guys.
And the answer to how well do jellyfish fossilize is not very.
Yeah, it's extremely poorly. So here's a reconstruction of Tenoimbricata, a bilaterally symmetrical echinoderm.
Whoop whoop.
Now, how do we
Those are
know?
tiny things.
Yeah. Now, how do we know that it's a bilaterally symmetrical? Well, there's a few ways. One is the mouth is actually very, very consistent with modern echinoderm mouths, which on things like sea urchins or sea stars face down, and on things like brittle stars face up. But in fact, when you look like ontologically, you'll actually see that starfish are basically upside down brittle stars, and sea urchins are just kind of starfish that have curled up, basically. So there you go. That's exactly what we were just told didn't exist. So glad to see that it in fact did exist. Let's carry on now that we know that he's just lying about starfish.
There's no evolutionary history showing what evolved into these creatures, and there's nothing connecting these creatures together. These phyla are as different as organisms can possibly be. But let's continue with Valentine.
Every single animal isn't directly ancestral to every single other animal.
Yeah, that's like the crocodile fallacy, right? Like, we should expect to see something that's directly intermediate between ducks and crocodiles. And it's just like, no, because those two things aren't direct. One isn't directly ancestral to the sort of look like a lizard with legs that go under it instead of out to the side. And you probably wouldn't have been able to identify it easily. I'm seeing a little bit of buffering. I'm sorry about that. I am seeing a good connection right now, but it is fluctuating a little bit, so we're going to push through it. If it's too bad, we might call it early.
He continues.
100% correct in the side chat. It says it's also called ortho. I think your internet provider hates you.
Yeah, probably. Although it's weird because I'll lose a connection to YouTube, but not to, say, Discord. So it might be OBS. Maybe it's time for me to like get a new version of OBS. I don't know. I'll try different things. Anyway, orthogenesis is the idea that evolution sort of gets on like its own momentum, right? So you'll get a lineage that just gets bigger and bigger antlers, and then the antlers will eventually get so big that maybe it'll go extinct, right? Or with horses, you know, horses just get on this trajectory of bigger and fewer toes and bigger body sizes. Except that's not true. Evolution doesn't have a trajectory that it's going to follow or a momentum. And what you see when you actually look closer is that you have different organisms going in different directions. So you have some horses which stay small, others that get bigger, some that reduce down to down from 5 toes to 3 to 1, some that don't. All of that all happening. So, yeah, here we go.
Each phyla with a fossil
Each phylum
record had already evolved its characteristic body plan when it first appeared.
So that's not true, so keep going.
So far as we can tell from
this phylum on the screen. I don't know why he was.
Look, a lot of people who are much smarter than me don't get plurals right. So Although I still am amused by that time that you showed me some video, or maybe it was I found it and I showed it to you. But there was this guy reading through like the Table of Nations in the Bible. He's like, man, a lot of these end in "eem." It's like, yeah, I wonder if that's like the masculine plural ending in Hebrew or something weird like that, huh? Hmm.
Yes.
All right, here we go.
From fossil remains, and no phyla is connected to any other via intermediate fossil types.
Okay, so here's some fun stuff with that. So no phylum is connected to any other with fossil intermediates. Okay, so let's bring up. We're just going to go on a quick Google adventure here. So we're going to switch this over to screen right here. We're going to say type in Onychophora. So what's a Onychophora? Onychophora is a group that are most commonly called the velvet worm. We'll just do an image search. So here are some velvet worms. I personally think that they're quite adorable. Now you can see that they're very similar to arthropods in many ways, right? They have segmentation. They have one little leg per segment. They've got little antennae. They've got little mouth parts, but they don't have an exoskeleton. Now,
little guys.
they are very small. They almost all live in jungles. You can actually see like their range here. Like, yeah, it's basically jungles, right? You can find them all the way up through a lot of Mexico, but like, yeah, these are primarily jungle dwellers. Okay, so they also share in common with arthropods that they have to shed their skin in order to grow. So while they don't have a big, thick, solid exoskeleton, they are constrained by their skin, and that's why they're both in this group called Ecdysozoa, but they're also in Panarthropoda. We're going to check Panarthropoda. Okay, so here are some other Panarthropods that are closer, but also one that's different. So up on the top right, we've got something that's pretty close to an Ecdysozoan, and then on the on the other ones, we have things that are closer and closer to actual arthropods. But then also, we have tardigrades, who are also in this large group of panarthropods. And we also have extinct examples of these things, like we have hallucigenia. We have things like hallucigenia, which has some of the characteristics of modern onychophorans, some of the characteristics of arthropods, and isn't really in either group, although it's almost certainly closer to onychophorans. So yeah, we do in fact have a fossil record of things that aren't quite in the modern phyla, but that are pretty darn close. So yeah. Also, with all these bugs and near bugs, where's Bree? I'm gonna get her into this chat, because that's the person who runs Hive Science, which was formerly Brainbug. The name changed not that long ago, so it's a little bit tough for me to remember like both of those names. And all right, here we go.
Someone in the chat was asking if velvet worms are edible, and I'm like, well, everything's edible if you're not a coward.
Everything's edible at least once.
At least once.
Yeah. So would I recommend eating one? No, I have no idea if they're toxic or palatable or anything like that.
I wouldn't do it because their saliva, it kind of liquefies the insides of their prey, so I don't think you want to eat that.
Well, you can just cut the head off. I don't normally eat the heads of most of the things I eat anyway.
Okay.
I'm not saying it still would. I'm just saying like you could avoid that. Also, for DM Wing says for $5, panarthropods, chimp lobsters.
The fact that everything
nice.
keeps crabbing, everything starts like evolving into crabs. We may end up all becoming transitional into like a crab.
Yeah, there's only a few endpoints for evolution. One is snake, one is crab. There's like a couple others, but those are the two big ones. Snakes and crabs just keep evolving, and there seems to be nothing anyone can do to stop it. Even though I don't really want to stop it.
There is nothing you can do.
Crab and snake are the ultimate life forms. Eventually, far in the distant future, like a billion years in the future, there will be interstellar civilizations, all of which are entirely either crab or snake. And there will be great crab-snake wars.
I can't wait to see the Great Corvid Uprising.
Well, eventually the corvids are going to have to evolve into crabs or snakes, so even they are not immune. Or they'll go extinct.
Or they'll eat all the crab snake that they can.
Well, that's just part of the war. All right, here we go.
But he continues, indeed, none of the invertebrate classes can be connected with another class by a series of intermediates.
Look, got really high pitched, but okay, buddy.
He said not only can we not connect the phyla together, but we can't even connect the classes that are in those phyla together by way of a series of fossilized intermediate forms.
Now, that's an interesting idea. Okay, so let's see. Let's pick some classes of invertebrates, right? So, let's see. Let's go to Oh, I forgot to switch this back when we were playing the video again. Oh, well, people still saw it. Let's go for, let's see. Attercoppus. Okay, so what's Attercoppus? Attercoppus is a transitional arachnid that links, is a transitional form between several groups of arachnids that then later split off, and Arania, or the actual true spiders. So Attercoppus, like whip scorpions, has a long telson, right? So what's a whip scorpion? Well, let's check the whip scorpion. They're also sometimes called vinegaroons because they shoot vinegar. So here we have a actual whip scorpion, and you can see the tail-like telson here at the bottom right. We'll tab. So here, right here, we have the long telson, just like Attercoppus, and then you see that in this group, the pedipalps have turned into scorpion-like claws. But then, if we change over to the tailless whip scorpion, or amblypygid, and remember, we were talking about class-type distinctions here. You might recognize this as the horrible spider monster from Harry Potter. Turns out it's not the most venomous thing in the world. It's, in fact, entirely harmless, unless you happen to be about the size of a cricket. But these guys lack the telson, and then their pedipalps have become raptorial rather than having a little claw like a scorpion. And all of these, you can see some of that all the way back in Attercoppus. Here we go. New tab. Oh, whatever. It's there. So, yeah, we do in fact have fossils linking different groups of invertebrates. Now, is it going to be the same for every group of invertebrates? Is every group of invertebrates as well evidenced as, say, arachnids? No. But it's just a lie to say that we don't have anything that links different classes of invertebrates together. And that was just the first one that came to the top of my mind. There are others.
They're simply not there. There's simply no evolution demonstrated by way of the fossil record for
None, huh? We'll keep listening to him for a little bit.
Invertebrate phyla, like those that we see here. The various phyla are again about as different as they possibly can be. They're separated from one another by enormous gaps. There's no fossil ancestry showing what evolved into them, and they're not connected together by fossilized intermediates either. And when these animals first appear in the...
Okay, so, no, none of these are the ancestors of primitive fish. What is? Things like Picaya, right? So, now the closest is the starfish, because, you know, it is the most closely related to fish, both being deuterostomes. But Deuterostomia split very early on between Chordata and Echinodermata. These are not very closely related organisms. So it's like this is just a straw man, right? No one is suggesting that any of these phyla are ancestral to Chordata. None of the extant phyla are in fact ancestral to any of the other extant phyla. That's just not how evolution works. So, yeah, this is... Look, it's one thing to just get facts wrong. It's another thing to straw man your opposition, right?
That's what young Earth creationists are really good at.
Yeah, in many cases. There are some exceptions, like Todd Wood actually does not strawman evolution. He actually understands it pretty well, and even understands that it's actually pretty well supported. He just thinks that he can find better reasons to believe in a young Earth.
We'll be waiting.
I mean, yeah, I await your paper on that actually demonstrates that with bated breath. You've written some papers, Todd. I don't think do that, but mean, that's about as honest as you can be as a creationist, right? As you can say, yeah, the evidence does support evolution. I think I can do better.
I love that he's showing a modern fish.
Well, that's another thing, is
As
all of
the
these are modern
ancestors,
animals, right?
just like, oh my god.
Except for the
stop.
trilobite. For some reason, just where he gets the trilobite, he decides that arthropod
Fish looks kosher though, so
does have those scales.
yep, and fins.
Yeah. Are there fish that have scales but no fins? What would that
Scales with
be?
no fin.
Yeah.
Let me think. Well, I was gonna say no, but that's they don't have scales, but they do have fins. Catfish have fins.
Yeah, they
but
definitely have
scales.
fins.
Like weird skin.
Because it seems to me like you could have simplified the commandment by just saying scales.
But like, I mean, sharks, they also have like a weird skin instead of like proper scales. So,
Well, tentacles.
well, obviously.
All right. Well, we'll leave it to the rabbis to figure out whether sharks
Yeah,
are
I'm
kosher.
gonna let them sort that out. I'm not. I'm not a posek, so
I neither have any inclination to keep kosher, nor do I have any inclination to eat sharks. So for me, it double doesn't matter.
double doesn't matter.
Understand, we're talking about highly, highly specialized animals. Aquatic animals are highly specialized for aquatic environments.
Yeah. And the thing is, these aquatic animals that evolved in the Cambrian have been aquatic for, billions of years. That's plenty of time to become very specialized at being aquatic. Like, this is not surprising. They didn't just
Would
pop into the
eels
ocean.
count in the like ancient Near East? Would the eel count as a fish because it lives in the water?
I would think so, but I'm not sure.
Well, they don't have scales either, but
All right, here we go.
Flying creatures are highly specialized for flying environments.
Well, some of them are, right? But we also have things like the sugar glider, which is only kind of specialized, or the Wallace's flying frog, which is even less specialized, or things like flying tree snakes, which are about as specialized as the flying frog, or the Draco lizard, which again, all of these are things that just kind of glide okay-ish, right? And then we have things like the tinamou, which is a full-fledged bird, but it still kind of sucks at flying because for one, doesn't even have a keeled breastbone. So yeah. Well, yeah, 82 Production says sugar gliders don't fly, they follow style. But that's the thing, that's what being a poorly adapted flyer looks like, right? Once you can get to the point where you can actually add energy to your glide faster than the energy is being depleted by the transition of potential to kinetic energy, you've now gone from gliding to flying. But there's a smooth gradient between those, right? It's just a mathematical little like line in the sand that once you cross it, you've gone from really efficient gliding right just into the first levels of flight.
But when these animals first appear in the fossil record, they appear out of nowhere. Animals like bats suddenly.
So bats are actually an example where they do kind of seem to come without much antecedent. But here's the thing, right? You're cherry picking when you pick bats, right? Okay, talk about horses. Why is it that our earliest fossil record of horses are, five-toed, very generalized, and look almost indistinguishable from our first rhinos? Why is it that the first sirenians, which are things like dugongs and manatees and things like that, look almost exactly like our first proboscideans? Things like elephants and mastodons. Why is that? Why is it that when we go back with so many of these other organisms, we have excellent fossil records, but then this guy says, oh, what about bats, though? Yeah, what about bats? You found a largely arboreal, very small-bodied, light-boned animal that happens to have a poor fossil record. It doesn't outweigh the good fossil record of all the other groups. We would expect there to be variation in how good of a fossil record different groups have, right? Like, Vishanti, have you ever heard an argument that all groups of animals should have a similarly detailed fossil record across all of the history of life?
no.
Yeah, I've never even heard them make the argument. They just assume it. So, I'm glad that this guy could cherry pick bats. Congrats, dude.
Appear in the fossil record as perfectly formed bats.
Well, perfectly formed, except that the earliest bats, like, what is it? Oh, I can't remember the name of the first bat. Anyone who can, put it in the chat. But it has fingernails on all of its wing fingers. That's not the same for modern bats. They only have a little claw on their thumb.
There's no evolutionary history for a bat, and it's
And there are within bats, so that's wrong.
a highly specialized flyer. Or like the pterosaurs, the pterodactyls. There's no evolutionary history in the fossil record for pterodactyls either.
Actually, I would have agreed with you until fairly recently, where some were in fact discovered. So, let's see. So Lagasucids, I believe, I'm going to double check, have recently been found to actually be stem pterosaurs. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was silosaurids. Silosaurids? Now I'm trying to remember if it was Lagasucids or silosaurids. Lagus. All right. Well, someone's gonna have to fact check me on that one because I can't find them often enough. But we do have Scleromoculus. Scleromoculus, and we shift over to your screen. These guys are almost certainly stem pterosaurs. They're definitely avometatarsallians, and they are probably stem pterosaurs. There's lots of technical reasons not to go into with that, but yeah. I mean, we do have, now granted, the sort of, Lagurpitids. The Venerable Beads points it was Lagurpitids. Thank you. Hey, there we go, I can type. There we go, Lagurpitids. So, got Lagurpitids. These guys are basically proto-pterosaurs. Now, granted, there is a pretty big morphological gap between, Lagurpiton and, say, like Eudimorphosaurus, right? There it is, Eudimorphodon. Right, like there's a pretty big gap between those two. I'm not going to pretend there isn't, right? It's not the case that we don't have any antecedents that aren't pterosaurs for pterosaurs. Also, watch out for David Peters stuff when you start searching for, pterosaurs. David Peters is just as bad as any young Earth creationist, and he's way more popular on Google. Okay. John, do you have anything else you want to add there?
No, I'm just like, oh man, I wish these were still alive.
Yeah, well,
flapping around.
That would be a lot of fun.
The first time they appear in the fossil record, boom, they appear out of nowhere as a perfectly formed pterodactyl.
They don't pop out of nowhere.
First, they don't pop out of nowhere, and also, I still want to know what an imperfectly formed pterodactyl is. Like, is it a deformed pterosaur? Is that what we're looking for?
It's just the top half.
The top half of the pterosaur.
It's just the top half. Yeah.
Well, that's the important half. That's the part that flies.
This is just one of the most frustrating things about young creationists and apologists is that they think things quote pop out of nowhere, and I'm like, you don't realize the very, very tiny percentage of animals that have ever lived get fossilized.
Oh yeah, it's almost certainly like less than one.
Yeah, it's a
species ever.
Tiny little sliver of all the possible animals that have lived.
And the thing is,
they're over here like, oh, it just pops out of nowhere. It's like, no, because fossilization's not common.
Yep, and there are also known, well-studied biases in the fossil record that say that certain kinds of species are more likely to be preserved than others, right? So if you're bigger and you have more hard parts, you're more likely to survive. If you live in certain environments, like if you live near a coast, or you live in like eutrophic lakes or around like low oxygen level lagoons, things like that. And also, apparently, the bat I was thinking was Onychoicteris from Balon Philotica, which does sound right. Sorry about that, guys. Look, there's so many fossil genera that I try to keep around in my brain. I can't keep them all in there.
It's also like, of course, creationists are baffled that there's not this overwhelming slew of fossils, because to them, of course, the flood's a given. There should be billions of. And we're like, no, actually, animals getting fossilized is not super common at all.
It's not.
That's why we have a lot, but it's not what creationists think should be this like dearth of, bones and stuff everywhere. It's like, of course, they get confused by it. It's like, well, that's because there wasn't a worldwide flood that you take for granted.
Mm-hmm. All right, here we go.
Well, Stephen Jay Gould was perhaps one of the most popular.
Oh, good. We're going to get a quote from 1977. Great.
Oh, and Andrew Coming in the chat says the earliest pterosaurs are not the same as the later ones either. They have longer tails, shorter necks, more teeth, and wings less adapted to flying long distance.
I mean, for one thing, they have teeth. They also still have the nares and the anterorbital fenestra as separate holes in the skull. More advanced pterosaurs are in the group monofenestra, so named because the nares and the anterorbital fenestra on each side have merged into one single. The more you know. But also, 1977. I don't know exactly when this talk was given, but it has to at least have been like the 90s. So
Creationists use any scientific source after 1995, please.
yeah, that
Like
would be nice.
challenge level impossible.
Evolutionists of our day, one of the most famous evolutions of our day, paleontologist, a fossil guy. And I say this because
Paleontologist of fossils.
Fossil guy.
Fossil guy. I'm sure that was right there on his full academic title. Dr. Stephen Jay Gould, paleontologist of fossil guy. Okay.
he was featured on an episode of The Simpsons, to be a
That was a good one, actually. That was the one where Lisa found the angel skeleton that was actually a hoax planted by a mall as a marketing stunt. So that was fun stuff.
famous scientist today. That's what you have to be. You have to have a cameo on one of our animated series.
You're just jealous because you'll never be on it.
Yeah, although I will say that, if you do get a cameo on The Simpsons, it probably does mean that you're famous.
Yep.
I think you can be famous without a Simpsons cameo, but if you get a Simpsons cameo and you're not like a friend or family of like Simpsons creative team, that definitely means that you are famous.
Well, he says this regarding, he admits to the extreme rarity of transitional forms, and he says this.
Okay, so we're going to be a little bit more specific. Stephen Jay Gould was talking about the rarity of transitional forms around like the lower than the family level, so like between like genera and species. He was well aware that transitional fossils above that level were actually fairly common. But let's see.
This. He says, the extreme rarity of transitional forms persists as the trade secret of paleontology. The evolutionary trees that adorn our textbooks have data only at the tips and nodes of their branches. The rest is inference, he says. However reasonable. Not the evidence of fossils.
Now, here's a question. What do you think goes in that ellipses? Because I actually don't know, right?
Do you want to look it up while you're dunking on this guy?
Yeah, so the extreme... Because here's the thing.
I will do that. I will absolutely do that.
Okay. Yeah,
so while you're doing that, I'm going to go find the ellipses part.
Yeah, because anytime you see ellipses in a creationist quote of a evolutionary biologist, it's always at least a little bit suspicious.
Or lots.
So this is Stephen Jay Gould, arguably one of the most famous paleontologists, evolutionary paleontologists of our day, admitting that the absence of transitional forms is a trade secret of paleontology. Well,
yeah, in his book where he's arguing for punctuated equilibrium, which would predict relatively few transitional species between genera and species, because his idea was that in the way that evolution generally proceeds in terms of new species coming about, is that large groups of animals generally don't actually morphologically evolve very much because, one, they tend to be pretty well adapted by the time they get to be a large population, and two, just the mathematics of population genetics means that new alleles are unlikely to reach fixation before being wiped out simply through genetic drift. But that when small populations then break off, encountering a new environment, because they're smaller, new alleles have an easier time fixing in that population. And additionally, because they're facing new selection pressures, they're likely to evolve relatively rapidly. And then if they reinvade the original territory, they'll do so as a new species. And that because that happens over, geologically speaking, a fairly short time, in a very small area, you're not likely to get fossils of the process of the evolution from one species into a sister species. But it's important to look at where that kind of transition is happening, right? It's at the level of genus and species, not at the level of family or class, which is why, again, Stephen Jay Gould knew about transitions at that level.
Okay, I think I found it.
What do we got?
All right, let me make sure that I can zoom this in so that I'm not skipping context. Okay, so this is a quote from Stephen Jay Gould's book, Evolution's Erratic Pace. It says, quote, "The extreme rarity of transitional forms in the fossil record persists as the trade secret of paleontology. The evolutionary trees that adorn our textbooks have data only at the tips and nodes of the branches. The rest is inference, however reasonable, not the evidence of fossils, yet Darwin was so wedded to gradualism that he wagered his entire theory on a denial of this literal record. The geological record is extremely imperfect in this fact, will to a large extent explain why we don't find interminable varieties connecting together all the extinct and existing forms of life by the finest graduated steps. He who rejects these views on the nature of the geological record will rightly reject my whole theory. Darwin's argument still persists as the favored escape of most paleontologists from the embarrassment of a record that seems to show so little of evolution. In exposing its cultural and methodological roots, I wish in no way to impugn the potential validity of gradualism, for all general views have similar roots. I only wish to point out that it was never seen in the rocks."
So hold on, there was nothing in those ellipses? Was the dot 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 in the original?
It's not. It's just, I don't know why he added that.
Oh, so
It's just,
he's just
it's
making
literally
it
just
look
a
like
semicolon. It says nodes of their branches, semicolon, the rest is inference, so I don't know why he
Okay,
added
so
that.
here's something. Let's see if we can find that quote from other creationists with the ellipses.
If
Because
you
what probably
if
happened
you
is
search for that quote, 90% of them are creationists.
yeah, do they have
Sites.
the ellipses? Because what usually happens with creationists is they just grab quotations from
Yeah,
other
they also quote each
creationists
other.
and they
Yeah.
never bother to go back to the original. So
But I
I'm
mean,
wondering if we
again,
could
the
find
whole
like the
point of this
evolutionary pathway
is
of those
that
ellipses.
Gould is arguing with gradualism. He's not arguing with evolution.
Right.
He's arguing for punctuated equilibrium. That's why he's making this statement.
Mm-hmm. Which I mean,
Like,
you can even
dude.
see it in the title of the book, right? Evolution's
Yeah,
erratic
it's
pace. Like, come
Evolution's
on, man.
Erratic Pace is the name of the book.
Yeah. All right. Go.
And he goes on to say the history of most fossil species include two features particularly inconsistent with gradualism. Notice he doesn't say the word evolution there. He says, one, stasis. Most species exhibit no directional change during their tenure on Earth. They appear in the fossil record looking much the same as when they disappear. Morphological change is usually limited and directionless. Two, sudden appearance. In any local area, a species does not arise gradually by the steady transformation of its ancestors. It appears all at once and, quote, fully formed. They're just misreading Gould to try to make their little argument.
I mean, Gould
But also,
is
this was
quite
written in
possibly
1977.
well, yeah, but Gould is quite possibly the least honestly and most frequently quoted paleontologist in all of like creationist discourse. They love quote mining that guy. But here we go. We're gonna see what else we got for.
Stephen Jay Gould went on to propose a new theory to
Like sub theory, maybe hypothesis.
explain the absence of transitional forms, a theory that he called punctuated equilibrium. Stephen Jay Gould and Niles Eldredge proposed what they call punctuated equilibrium. They argued that once an animal becomes adapted to an environment, it will stay that way for a long period of time.
Which makes sense, right? Because
Change if the environment doesn't change.
right. So there's this thing called stabilizing selection, right? It's one of the main kinds of natural selection. There's directional selection, in which for a long period of time, an environment is favoring a more and more extreme morphotype in the species, right? Then there's disruptive selection, where two different physiologies are favored. And then there is stabilizing. So when we look at, say, directional selection, right, this is not very hard to figure out. So let's say we have the race between gazelles and cheetahs, right? In both cases, getting faster by whatever means more success, whether that be by escaping the cheetah or whether it be by more regularly getting lunch, right? So you see, as that relationship persists, a constant drive to increase speed on both sides. So even if you started with cheetahs and gazelles both being relatively slow compared to now, they're going to get a whole lot faster. And if one of them were to go away, you would have an anomalously fast animal, which is actually the case with the North American pronghorn, which used to be preyed upon by the North American cheetah, which, while it wasn't actually a cheetah, it was actually more closely related to the American mountain lion, which itself is also, the closest relative of the cheetah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But the American cheetah was more closely related to the mountain lion than the African cheetah is. Whatever. the North American cheetah was basically hunting the same way as the African cheetah. It was hunting pronghorn. Now that it's gone, you have pronghorn left that are absurdly fast. They're the fastest like terrestrial vertebrates in North America by a mile. They're the highest jumpers by a ridiculous margin. They don't need to be. But that's because of long-standing directional selection. Now, if you have disruptive
and there's
selection,
no reason for them to not continue to remain fast. So, yeah.
Now, with disruptive selection, actually, you guys have seen the most recent. Was it who made that the prehistoric documentary just recently? It was on it was Prehistoric Planet. What was that on? Like Apple Plus or something?
Sure.
All right. Well, everyone remembers the femboy pterosaur, right? More scientifically typical term would be sneaky male. So you had two groups of males, right? One was very large, very aggressive towards other males, and claimed a large territory for breeding purposes, right? Had a big harem. But the star of this section of the episode was actually another male pterosaur that looked more like a female, would sneak into the territories of larger males and then mate with the females. Now, in this case, you have two breeding options, both of which are successful in these pterosaurs. And this happens in the real world. Like the giant cuttlefish of Australia does the same thing, right? So you have the big territorial males that are successful because they can breed with a large group of females in their territory. But the sneaky males are also successful. However, if you're one of the large males, decreasing in size doesn't help, right? Because it just makes you worse at being one of the territorial males. On the other hand, if you're one of the sneaky males, increasing in size doesn't help because it just makes you easier to detect by the large territory holding males. So in this case, you have two morphologies that are being favored by sexual selection, which is a form of natural selection. Stabilizing selection is what happens when you're already well adapted, and significant change from your current morphology is going to cause a decrease in fitness. So basically, anything that overtly changes the way you function as an organism is going to be worse. And if stabilizing selection exists and the environment persists, then evolution will say that you should stay morphologically the same. So stasis isn't like a hypothesis that we have to test. We know it occurs. We can see it occurring in modern organisms. In fact, in a few months, I'm going to be having a video where I have Dr. Dan Cardinal talk about a related idea, which is robustness. Right. So, in robustness, you have a fitness landscape, and the fitness landscape is an n-dimensional plot, right, where you have morphology along all of the axes except one, and then one axis is dedicated to fitness. And often you can have very high fitness peaks, but they will have very sharp slopes, so that any deviation away from that peak will result in significantly lower fitness. And what actually tends to happen is that populations tend to cluster strongly on broader but lower plateaus that actually end up having a higher average fitness, because it means that if they mutate a little bit, it's actually not going to reduce their fitness all that much. And so once they get onto this fitness plateau, they just kind of tend to stay there until the fitness landscape shifts, which corresponds to a shift in the environment. Now I feel like we've rambled a lot on this.
Well, we're about to see a lot of interesting changes in the animal kingdom due to climate change, because when your climate starts going crazy, the animals are either going to die off, adapt, or migrate. And we're already starting to see some of the tertiary effects of this. Like this week, I learned that polar bears and grizzly bears are kind of encroaching on each other's habitat because of climate change. Their normal environment isn't really giving them the food supply that they need. So as things are warming up slowly, the polar bears are moving out of their normal territories, grizzly bears are going farther north, and on rare occasions they do breed, and you end up with, what do you call them, growler bears or pisleys, depending on which one's the father and mother. But you're about to start seeing some wacky, crazy, bear hybrid things coming out of here. Will any of them get preserved? Maybe. Chances are low.
Oh, here's another one. Do you live basically north of Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona? Small parts of California? And in North America? Have you ever seen a wild armadillo? Congratulations. That is an animal that is spreading up into North America as North America warms. And it's doing it quite successfully.
And if you don't see them yet, you will when you hit them with your car.
Right.
Yes, boy, have I hit many an armadillo in my time.
Armadillo Bane right here.
Yeah.
And then when the environment changes, it'll evolve rapidly to try to adapt to those new changes.
That's not actually what Gould is saying. He's usually saying that what is normally going to happen is a splinter group of this main population is going to go off and become isolated, whether it be the result of just natural processes or just like a migration to a new area. And then that small group will then adapt to the new environment and then spread out from there. In fact, large populations of sexually reproducing organisms actually do have trouble adapting to big environmental shifts because they have such a big gene pool that even advantageous new alleles have a tendency to just get swamped on the basis of statistical processes like genetic drift. So here we go.
So he called this punctuated equilibrium. But I don't know if you heard, but it's basically saltation by a different name.
No, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to go on a quick intermission. I'm going to put some more ice in this drink and fill it a little bit.
I'm like, do I need to grab a beer?
Yeah, look, if I hadn't accidentally shattered my rum bottle, I would be putting some rum in here. So rip my rum bottle because it was cold, and then I was screwing it open, and then condensation just made it slip right through my hand, shatter on the floor of the kitchen. So my kitchen smelled like booze for a while as I swept up every last piece of glass that I could find, and then kept sweeping for like hours, and still was finding new shattered bits of glass because there's one thing I learned about broken glass is it's physically impossible to get all of it off the ground.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would probably be getting some rum if I had any right now. Unfortunately, I do not.
I mean,
but
it's going to be in the low 80s today, so this is perfect weather to crack open a Modelo Especial and put some lime in there.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That does sound good. All right, well, we're going to be back in
Tacos.
just a few. I'm going to be back with water. I don't know what Shanti's going to be back with. It might just be straight up vodka. We'll find out.
I don't actually have any. Actually, wait, I do. I have a little tiny bottle of Icelandic vodka that I got when I went to Iceland.
Is it tiny in the sense of like a nip bottle, or is it tiny in the sense of like?
It's like one of those little souvenir bottles. Like it's maybe like 3-4 ounces or something like that. It's not. It's not.
A couple shots worth, basically.
Yeah, a couple shots worth.
All right. Well, we'll see just how much booze Vishanti comes back with and which kind when we're back from the. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
Yep.
All right, and we are back. Guys, thank you very much. I want to make sure everyone knows to hit like. That is important. Also, I'm going to do my mid-credit commercial thing, which is to say, hey, if you really like this stuff and you really want to help out the channel, because, you know, the channel is always on a knife's edge as to whether or not it's going to make or lose money, there is a Patreon and a channel membership. The Patreon starts as low as $1 a month, but you can go annual for, I think, a 12% discount on top of that. So, I mean, it can be like less than $10, I think. And you get access to early access. There's currently, I think, 9 or something videos that you could be watching right now. Basically like 4 or 5 hours or so worth of my content that is not available publicly. You gain access to a Discord server that I hang out in pretty frequently. Behind the scenes stuff, you'll always know when I'm working on new videos. And there's also other benefits, like you can get your name in the credits. You can get files that I produce, either for behind the scenes stuff or just for fun that I then share with you guys. So if you do want to consider that, please do. It really helps out. And you know, the more people who support the channel that way, the easier it is for me to make sure that I can focus as much as I want, or as much as I can, on making great content, and at least less I have to worry about other things like, will I be able to get the booze that I want for Kent with Bent? The Kent with Bent booze budget is entirely viewer supported. Anyway, we're gonna hit play, unless Vishanti, you have anything for us real quick before we get going.
Nope, just that I went and got myself a nice cold beer.
Nice.
Modelo especial.
That line?
Sin limón. Porque no tengo limones.
¿Por qué no?
Yo no sé. ¿Dónde está mis limón?
All right, well, it's time to go to the grocery store.
Agreed.
Back in Darwin's day, they argued that organisms would evolve in rapid jumps, leaving...
Oh, right, saltation. As the person who, in the early 2000s, was the basically only author on the saltation page of Wikipedia, fun fact, that actually is true, I'm going to talk a little bit about what saltation is. So saltation is not punctuated equilibrium. See, punctuated equilibrium essentially has the same mechanisms as gradualism. It's just that gradualism, as defined by Stephen Jay Gould, expects that morphological change occur at a relatively steady rate over geological history. Whereas Stephen Jay Gould said that no, the rate of morphological change actually can change significantly over geological history. Saltation is the idea that a crocodile could lay a bird egg. Saltation is, in fact, not what we're talking about. And this comes from the Latin word saltus, which means a jump. Right? So if you want to take a jump, you take saltus in Latin. It has nothing to do with salt, despite the name.
No transitional.
Bree's here. Bree, you should have been here earlier when we were looking at panarthropods. I was specifically looking for you in the chat. Oh well. Bree's always here just a little bit after I want her to be here to talk about bugs.
Forms. Darwin said, no. So this evolution must be a slow and gradual process, the same kind of slow and gradual process we see have happened through dog breeding and pigeon breeding and horse breeding.
Ironically, that's actually not very slow and gradual on a geological time frame, right? Like the majority of dog and cat breeds that exist now have been created in like the last few centuries. And that was pretty fast. Like this is like the fast version of evolution that Stephen Jay Gould was saying does happen.
So it must be slow and gradual. He said the fossils would eventually be found, argued that they would eventually be found. They haven't been found.
They haven't been found. Okay, keep that in mind, everybody.
150 years later, we haven't found the fossils, so paleontologists today are going right back to where they were back then, arguing for saltatory type evolution.
No, but okay.
What they call punctuated equilibrium. The fact is, the slow and gradual process that Darwin envisioned should have left abundant fossils. But the evolutionary tree that is often shown without disclaimer is simply without fossil support. It's mostly inference, like Stephen Jay Gould said.
Well, one thing I want to talk about with trees, evolutionary trees and whatnot, is that every phylogenetic tree or cladogram is itself a hypothesis, right? It's a hypothesis that itself is based on conclusions from things like fossil and molecular evidence, but it is the case that they are all hypotheses. So I just want to make sure that that's clear, right? They're always presented as, here's like the statistical support we have for this particular hypothesis. And then when we did a different kind of analysis, this slightly different tree came out of it, and here's the support that one has based on this statistical analysis. And if we get this additional data here or there, then we can make a better hypothesis with even stronger support, things like that. I just want to point that out. And another thing is, Creationists, I think he's probably complaining, and Creationists generally complain that the nodes of branches don't have organisms listed as this is what the node is between these two branches. This is what the common ancestor is. That's because the way that we do these analyses, right, is you feed all the taxa that you're looking at into whatever analysis you're looking at. And because they're all under analysis, they all, by definition, end up as the tips of branches. So even if you did include an actual organism that happened to be the common ancestor of other organisms on the table, it's physically impossible to recover them that way. Because the kind of mathematical analysis you're doing isn't able to recover them as the common ancestor. It's not able to put parts of the taxa that you have listed at nodes. It's mathematically impossible. So basically, Creationists like to complain that math exists. But to be fair, given that they're usually 4 to 6 orders of magnitude off in everything they say, I guess it would make sense that they complain about math existing.
Instead, what we find in the fossil record are the same distinct groups that we find in living populations.
Yep. Basically, he's like, hey, how come we don't have fossils for the nodes? It's exactly what I just said.
Despite an enormity of effort, the primitive ancestors of the various phyla have not been found in the fossil record, nor can evolutionists connect the various phyla to each other by transitional fossil forms. Well, there are other problems with the evolutionist interpretation of the fossil record, like the out-of-place fossils that have been found.
I would love for one to be named. I want to hear about
I
these.
would like a citation. Please.
Yeah, this is a citation needed sort of a time. Yeah, I would love a citation on that. Because the thing is, whenever you hear out of place fossil or artifact, you're usually talking to a pseudoscientist.
And it's supposed to be out of place artifacts, not out of place fossils.
Well,
Nice
I mean,
try.
look, most of the people who do the art, like the OO parts, are, like pseudo-archaeologists, but I could see a pseudo-paleontologist wanting to change that to out of place fossil. Because, you could have a fossil of a bunny in a Cambrian. It's not technically an artifact, because artifacts have to be produced by humans by definition. I'm okay with the term, if they existed.
Well, I mean, he wants to try to make this a case for like, oh, this fossil is not in the place where evolutionists said it should be because it got scattered by the water of the flood.
Yes, the water of the flood. Yeah,
The
that is a good
flood.
point. Because he's not arguing
So,
that
yeah,
mammals
that's why I'm
evolved
calling
faster than we
BS
thought
on
they did.
this.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Now, the geologic order of fossils described by paleontologists is again not set in stone. We find these out-of-place fossils.
Do we? You haven't named anybody.
We don't.
Understand that what you're looking at by way of their interpretation is that the first time an organism appears in the fossil record is the time that it first evolved.
Wrong. That's the first time we know about it. Because it appeared there, we know it had to have existed earlier, right? It's very unlikely that you're going to find the first ever example of an organism. So that's always why whenever you look at things like time frames, right? There's always sort of like a fading of like, or there's I can't remember the name of that plot where you have the main bar, but then you have the two little like tails that go on either side to give you the range. That's why when you look at like how long has this organism existed, you have things like that to indicate that this is how long we know they were around for, but they almost certainly extended both before and after in most cases. So no, the first time an organism appears in the fossil record is almost certainly not when it evolved. Almost certainly after it evolved.
The last time they appear in the fossil record is believed to be the time that it went extinct.
In most cases, also no. There are examples where that is the case. For instance, where we have mass extinctions, where we have just a gigantic decrease in biodiversity overall. We usually then do go on and infer that the organisms that don't appear above that, but do appear below it, probably went extinct during the mass extinction. And that's just because if most of those organisms didn't do that, then we should expect some of them to persist across the barrier. But when they don't, it's reasonable to infer that that's when they went extinct. But if there isn't a mass extinction, like there isn't a mass extinction between the Jurassic and the Cretaceous, but the changeover between the fauna as you go on there, the last time we see like a Stegosaurus is probably not the last time Stegosaurus ever existed on Earth. Box and whisker plot. Thank you, Thronmulus. That is what I was talking about. Box and whiskers. Yep.
Okay? But we can find lots of animals, we have found lots of animals whose last appearance in the fossil record was millions and millions of years ago, and they're still alive today.
Oh, I would love for one to be named. Oh, it's the coelacanth. We're going to hear about the coelacanth. We're going to talk about
the Creationist center square on a bingo card.
Right?
They're always going to bring up coelacanths. It's like that, Nebraska Man, Piltdown Man. Those are all squares on the Young Earth Creationist bingo card. It's like Stephen Jay Gould quote out of context.
Random big number, just because big numbers are impressive.
Yeah, random big number, quoting Darwin as if he's the be-all, end-all of, science and evolutionary theory, that science stopped in late 1970 or something.
I should find a company that prints bingo cards and see if I can get them to make custom Creationist bingo cards, and then see if people will buy them.
I know some. I'll send a link to you after the stream's over.
All right, guys, if custom Creationist bingo cards are a thing that you might actually want to get and stamp as you watch videos like this, let me know. Because I think it will be fun to play a little bit of Creationist bingo. Now, I don't have a way to actually verify that anyone in particular has won, and I think there would be legal issues with me giving out prizes, but it would still be a fun thing to do, I think. So let me know. And if it's not something you would want to do with a physical purchase, I still might be able to make digital things that you could download. We'll see.
Well, one good example is the coelacanth. Now, the coelacanth predates the dinosaurs by millions of years in the fossil record and was once thought to have gone extinct 70 million years ago until it was discovered alive and well in 1938 by a fisherman.
Now, here's the interesting thing. The modern coelacanth, of which I believe there are 2 species, both in the genus Latimeria. Ushanti, would you like to know what the fossil record of Latimeria is in great detail?
I sure would.
Okay, I will tell you. Now you know. There is, in fact, no fossil record for Latimeria. So why is it that this is a coelacanth? Well, it belongs to a larger group of organisms, the coelacanths, of which in the past, many were shallow water marine or fluvial or lacustrine animals, right? So they're living in like shallow water oceans, in lakes, in rivers. But we don't have any deep sea fossils of coelacanths, and the coelacanths that we have today are significantly different from the ones in the fossil record, which means this isn't an example of an organism that we knew to go extinct. It's an example of an organism of a subgroup that we didn't even know ever existed that persists to today, while the other groups of that large category have all gone extinct. And Nathaniel Grave for $5 says, it's only creationism if it's from the Creat region of Alabama, otherwise it's sparkling science nihilism of alcohol, but whew.
Not for me!
Well, no, not going to criticize you on that one, because
also, we got Comcasted buffering for a real long time there just now.
Yeah.
Fisherman captured one, brought it to shore, showed it was really weird, so they showed it around a little bit, and some expert realized that it was a living fossil. Well, we now know where these things live. They live deep in the Indian Ocean off the coast of Madagascar.
The kind of place where fossils are unlikely to survive, and it's also really hard to go digging for fossils. You know what percentage of fossils hunts in the world take place at the bottom of the ocean? It's approximately 0% of fossil digs happen at the bottom of the deep ocean. Yeah, because I'm say like Canada, but even then, you're primarily working at low tide. Basically, no one's going down to the 2 meters for old ones and 75 centimeters for modern ones. So, I mean, there is a variety of sizes in ancient and modern coelacanths, but I do believe that there were much bigger coelacanths in the past than there are now. But I also think there were some that were smaller than the ones we have now. But I'm also not like super well versed on the total diversity of coelacanths.
And they have found caught like 80 of these at this point. They're really valuable because museums.
I mean, there's 2 whole populations. I don't know where this 80. I don't know.
Want them for specimens. But
Source,
interestingly,
Yeah, well, that is.
the coelacanth
It's not just Euthromulus. Everyone is noticing that there's a inconsistent connection.
was one of the evolutionist transitional forms. Now, the coelacanth is a group of fish that are called Sarcopterygii instead of the ray fin fishes.
Hey, that's us too. So, cool facts.
Actinopterygii, they have these, they're called the lobe fin fishes. They have these big, fat, fleshy fins. And the evolutionists said, oh, this animal must have evolved up on a life on land. Use those big, fat, fleshy fins to crawl up on land. Well, the reason why we didn't know that they were alive today is because they don't live on the continental shelf. They don't use those fat, fleshy fins for crawling along the bottom of the continental shelf. They live deep in the Indian Ocean.
Yeah, these ones do, dude. But the ones that you're showing above don't. They did live in shallow water because, fun fact, you can tell the difference between deep sea deposits and shallow water deposits in the rocks if you know what you're talking about and you're a geologist. Like,
which he's neither.
well,
So.
yeah, obviously. But that's the thing is, it's like, oh, the modern coelacanths, which are only distantly related to the ancient coelacanths, live at the bottom of the ocean. Therefore, the ancient coelacanths that lived in intertidal zones and in shallow marine deposits and in rivers, they also lived at the bottom of the ocean. No, that's not how that works. And I've just now been distracted by a chuckwalla that just crawled down the wall outside, right in front of my line of vision. A chuckwalla is a kind of lizard, in case people didn't know. I didn't know until I moved around into Arizona. All right, here we go.
Which is why we didn't know they were alive. So, well, let me show you some other out-of-place fossils. This is the Wollumi pine. It was discovered in 1994 in the Blue Mountains near Sydney, Australia, after being
In a very small population in a very small area that is very remote. Yep.
thought to have gone extinct 150 million years ago, based on its last position in the geological column.
Okay. I mean, this is true. So I want to talk about something called a Lazarus taxon, right? So a Lazarus taxon is a taxon that seems to go extinct at a certain point in the fossil record, only to reappear significantly later. And the Wollumi pine is essentially one of these, right? And so are the coelacanths. Now, there are different reasons why these taxa can go apparently extinct. In the Wollumi pine, because it's a relatively low population group and because they have an extremely restricted range, what's probably the case is that they've had a low population in a very restricted range for a very long time, which means that you're unlikely to find lots of fossils of them. For the same reason that Stephen Jay Gould was saying you're probably not going to find the fossils of the transitional forms that he was talking about, because they just aren't that many of them and they don't live many places. Command Cyborg, who's been a member for 19 months at the level of Amnio, thank you very much, Command Cyborg, says, it annoys me more than I like when they present their issues with paleontology, including hoaxes, in the wrong chronological order. Yeah, so here's the thing, right? Creationists tend to think that the entire fossil record formed more or less simultaneously. So for them, I don't even think they think about the idea of a chronological order fossil record. But yeah, the Wollumi pine is an example of a Lazarus taxon. I don't know what to tell you. Evolution doesn't predict that things have to go extinct, and no one normally actually thinks that when something stops appearing in the fossil record, that means it had to have gone extinct right then and there. It's an option, and it might be the default option in some cases that it went extinct around that time, but like, evolution doesn't require that these things go extinct.
Death is a requirement of evolution.
It's
Why
not
it's
even
fake.
that. It's not even a requirement of evolution for anything to die in particular. Also, Thromulus has been a member at the Saurops level, I can read, for 25 months. I also know what levels I have in my Patreon and channel memberships. But Thromulus says, coelacanths aren't the only Sarcopterygians, you dingus. In other news, AIG was the Kaiba no Chinpo. Remember, guys, this is not actually a drinking stream, so I'm not taking drinks of alcohol for you guys sending things about AIG being a bag of dicks.
Take a drink for that.
But I do appreciate it. And yeah, so there are other Sarcopterygians, like all tetrapods are Sarcopterygians, so you're a Sarcopterygian, I'm a Sarcopterygian. But there are also the lungfish, also Sarcopterygian. And there are other groups that are also extinct, but I mean, it used to be a much more diverse group of fish.
Now, the ginkgo was similar. The ginkgo was thought to have gone extinct 270 million years ago.
No, that's just where it disappears. Ginkgos have been known throughout human history to exist. No one ever thought they went extinct.
Until it was discovered in Japan. In 1996,
I promise you the Japanese already knew about it.
the Laotian rock rat was discovered.
Laotian, that's Laotian. From Laos,
Laotian, yeah.
not the Laotian.
Being sold in a meat market in Laos. It was thought to have gone extinct 11 million years ago.
Okay, here's a cool thing about Laos and neighboring countries. They're both politically unstable and full of jungle. Both of those make it really hard for rigorous academic studies to be done and surveys taken of the whole area. So yeah, new animals are discovered in places like that when you do in fact get scientists going in there. Now, when I say discovered, obviously the locals there already knew about this. But the difference is that it's not in the wider scientific literature, right? And in fact, that doesn't have to be like some horrible, like far away remote place, right? You right now could be living in a place where like you know that there's this kind of animal, maybe you don't know exactly what it's called. It might be because no one knows what it's called, because new organisms are discovered in places like North America too. But when it comes to, decent sized mammals, hard to get to places like the depths of the jungle, and especially in places where the political situation is always a little bit iffy. Yeah, that's where you find things like new mammal species. Also, if it's a rat, it couldn't have been thought to have been extinct all that long ago. Let's actually find out. Let's look this up a little. Laotian rock rats. Sometimes it's called the rat squirrel, a species of rodent found in Muin something or other, Muin region of Laos. Species was first described in a 2005 article by consider the animal to be so distinct from all living rodents they place it in a new family, Pawnastidae. Okay, so in 2006, it was suggested by Mary Dawson and co-authors that it was actually in the family Diatomidae, which was thought to have been extinct for 11 million years ago. So, let's see. That is currently looks like to be the consensus, but also 11 million years. That's not that crazy to think that something went a fossil record for an entire family of rodents went away 11 million years ago, and then one member of that group persisted into the current times in a jungle. Like, that's just not very extraordinary. DM Wing for $5 says, "What's this about AIG being a bag of roosters?" So DM Wing, in case you don't know, on my Tuesday streams, I have several drinking criteria that cause a drink for the drinking game, and one of them is anyone who super chats anything about AIG being a bag of, those roosters that you have there. And that is because they like to copyright claim everything. They famously will copyright claim my videos using their videos as fair use, while their original video, in fact, itself uses fair use clips of other people's content. They would like to deny me the right that they would like to take advantage of. So, yeah. Right.
2005, a mammal was found with a dinosaur in its stomach.
Yeah. Mammals evolved in the Jurassic. Dinosaurs evolved in the Triassic. And so, yeah. I don't know if you guys know this, but dinosaurs still eat mammals.
Yep.
I mean, I've seen dinosaurs eat mammals in person. This is not exactly like a new thing. So I don't understand why it should be shocking that from the Jurassic on, there should be dinosaurs eating mammals, and occasionally vice versa too, because some of the largest mammals were larger than some of the smallest dinosaurs in the Mesozoic, and they ate some of those smallest dinosaurs. I mean, this is just ordinary, everyday this is what we expect paleontology. This is completely in line with everything that everyone always thought about these organisms.
Now, this discovery was shocking to paleontologists at the
No, it wasn't. It was cool because usually it's hard to identify the gut contents of an animal as the actual gut contents as opposed to something else that kind of washed in there during the decay and fossilization process. And it was cool because it's a direct evidence of a predator-prey interaction between two organisms, but it's not shocking, right? Being really cool is not the same as being shocking. So you can kind of think of it like, you ever watch a world record speed run of a game you like? It's not shocking, but it's still really cool that someone can play this game that well. But like, you knew that going in, that was a thing that happened.
time because it was believed that mammals of this size did not live at the time of the dinosaurs.
I mean, what? Mammals ranged in size from like basically a medium dog all the way down to a tiny shrew during the Mesozoic. It would be nice if we got a citation as to exactly what this was so I could look up more details, but like... Oh, no, he's got it reversed. This is actually a picture of a mammal found with a dinosaur in his stomach. Okay. Yeah. Again.
That's so weird. It's not like cats eat birds.
Right. To this day, mammals eat dinosaurs, dinosaurs eat mammals. I don't know. Even if this was the biggest mammal yet discovered from the Mesozoic, well, okay, that had to be something. Right? Like, if you take all the Mesozoic mammals, one of them has to be biggest. If you happen to find one that's a little bit bigger, well, just broke the record. But what prediction does that negate? And like I said, we know about mammals that are all the way up to the size of like a medium-sized dog in the Mesozoic. So I don't know.
See, in order to convince them their proposed sequence of fossils is incorrect, you literally will have to find one in the belly of another.
Nothing about this indicates the sequence of anything is incorrect. This is a complete nonsense. I honestly don't know what's happening with this argument right now. Like, a mammal once ate a dinosaur. Yup.
Okay, cool story, bro.
I really don't know what I'm supposed to be taking away from this. Because, like, yeah, okay. Great. In fact, there might be a clip that I want that might actually express how confusing this is, if I can find it. Let's see what I've got here. No, I don't think I have it. Check one more folder, and if I don't have it, then I don't have it. But you guys will probably recognize it if I do. Nope, I think I lost that clip. Oh no, here it is.
Non sequitur.
Oh,
Your facts are uncoordinated.
There you go, guys. That is the clip that I wanted. All right. Sorry, Vishanti, you couldn't see it.
Because they can explain away out-of-place fossils. And they frequently explain them away by arguing that a secondary erosion event had taken place.
Okay. That does happen, and you can usually tell. It's usually not like we just pretend, right? So if in fact you can see an area where rocks that are incongruous with the surrounding rocks are there, and there's a dip that is consistent with like a paleo canyon or something, then yeah, obviously erosion occurred and infilled the channel. But like, this isn't out of place, so I don't know what to tell you. Oh yeah, as Nelk says, Dapper, one day there were dinosaurs, the next there were mammals. So how could a mammal eat a dinosaur? Yeah, that is definitely how evolution predicts that the fossil record should look.
Because, let me go back to a diagram of fossils. If you take a sequence of fossils like this and you start eroding it from the top layer is going to erode off first and be deposited, and the layer that's beneath it will be eroded next and will be deposited on top of the other. So through a secondary erosion event, you can completely invert an entire fossil sequence.
Well, you can't really invert it.
Yeah.
No, but what you can do is you can show that, hey, there's actual erosion here, because we can see things like, erosional features like um, erosion channels and things like that. And we can also see like actual erosion of the lower members of the sequence, like being rounded off or things like that. And then, yeah, like this is a thing that there's a bit of Cenozoic coal deposit in parts of North America that also has bits of non-coal fossil-bearing stuff from the Mesozoic eroded into it from higher up in the Appalachians. And like it's a well-known phenomenon, but the thing is that the actual fossils aren't found directly in the coal. They're just found in the area where the coal is, sometimes on top, sometimes, sitting in like a trough or something in a coal bed. So we know that there was secondary erosion. Like, to say that this isn't a thing, you're going to, one, have to show that all the scientists are just lying when they say they've identified this as rock that isn't the same as the surrounding rock. And then you're also going to have to show why secondary erosions can't happen, which, good luck. Yeah.
And they argue away most of these out-of-place fossils by arguing that they were just they're out of place due to a secondary erosion event.
Have you gone on to demonstrate that that's not the case? Because I'm not seeing any kind of citation.
Literally, you have to find one of a belly of another to convince them they're wrong and that mammals actually lived during the times of the dinosaurs. Well, another major problem with the secular interpretation of fossils is the enormity of living fossils that we have found.
Oh, hey, look, we already talked about the velvet worms. I don't know why salamanders are living fossils. Maybe he's going to talk about these. I don't know.
Now, living fossil is a name for an organism that is found in the fossil record but is still alive today.
Not quite. There are no such organisms, essentially, unless you're talking about the most recent fossils. What's actually happening is that you are looking at a member of a group that is present in the fossil record that has changed very little morphologically from the fossil members of that same group. And the thing is, remember when we talked about stabilizing selection? If you're well adapted to your niche and environment, then there's no particular need for you to evolve morphologically in any significant way.
Alive today and identical to their fossilized specimens.
No. There are no such organisms. For instance, the modern nautilus, various nautiluses, aren't identical to any fossil nautiloids or nautilus. The modern xiphosaurians, the modern horseshoe crabs, are not identical to any fossil xiphosaurians. I don't even know why we're showing a fossilized ant, because that's by definition part of the fossil record. I don't know very much about ginkgos, but I mean, I would imagine that just like all these other things, different species than what you're getting in the fossil record. Same thing with the tuatara. I believe there are two species of tuatara, or maybe it's one species with subspecies. But yeah, they're not identical to any rhynchocephalians from the fossil record. The group to which they belong, rhynchocephalia. It's the sister group, basically, to lizards.
Find lots of these, lots of living fossils that date back hundreds of millions of years. Let me give you a few examples. Stingrays are found in the fossil record that paleontologists claim date back 50 million years, but they are identical to the stingrays we find today.
You got a citation? Like, what is the species that we're seeing in the top right, and when is the fossil?
Looks the same. Must be the same.
Well, I mean, actually, it
I'm
doesn't
very
look the
smart.
same, in fact. So one thing that you can see is that there are, in fact, some probable differences. For instance, if this is a stingray, it's singularly missing a barb. So it's not identical. But like, if you want to make the claim that it's identical, you need to cite, like, what is this fossil? What genus is it? What species? What is the genus and species of the stingray in the top? And if you're saying that they're the same genus and species, but scientists disagree, then you're going to need to put in your reasons why you think they are the same. But instead, we're just like, hey, look, I found a stingray fossil that looks like a stingray. Congrats. Good job. I don't know.
Squids are found that date back 160 million years, but they're identical to the squids we have alive today.
Yes, but there are also other things like orthocones and belemnites and other things that are in fact more basal than squids are. Squids are actually pretty highly derived. And there are intermediates between things like octopi and or octopuses or whatever you want the plural to be, and squid. And like this is This is a tactic taken from Harun Yahya, or Adnan Oktar, a man who, as far as I know, is still currently serving out his 1,000-year prison sentence for child trafficking in Turkey. A country which does not take lightly, apparently, to child trafficking. So good for Turkey. And basically, his modus operandi is he takes a picture of a fossil, and then he takes a picture that he thinks superficially resembles it of a modern organism and says, "Where's the evolution?" Now, often, in fact, these organisms are not very similar. Like he does this with a modern parrot and Psittacosaurus, which are very little alike. The only thing that is similar is basically they both have a beak. That's about it. That's the extent of the similarity. But then the thing is, like, this is a prime example of cherry picking. You're specifically picking fossils that you think look similar to the extant organism. What about the others that you're ignoring?
Lobsters date back 200 million years. They're still the same.
Actually, that is an interesting one. So the evolution of shrimp and lobsters and decapods is actually fairly mysterious. We don't have a lot of great fossils for them. It's one of the areas, just like bats and to some degree pterosaurs, that I would love to see more fossils found. But, yeah. We don't have a great fossil record for the divergence of those groups.
Cockroaches date back 250 million years. They're still the same.
I mean, okay, but what about before 250 million years, right? So, like, okay, do this. Let's see. What is the taxonomy of a cockroach? So we check on that. Let's see. Cockroaches. All right. So they are in Blattodea, which includes cockroaches and termites. And what do you look at? What do you know? Immediately, one of the first things that comes up is a fossil Blattodian, which actually does not look a whole lot like a modern cockroach. So I'll be putting that up on screen in just a second. It's like literally all you had to do was go to Wikipedia to find a fossil, one of the earliest fossil Blattodians, and it doesn't look much like a modern cockroach. Shocking, I know. Look, if a quick trip to Wikipedia proves you wrong, maybe it's time to reassess your methods. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway. Oh, citation needed thing up. Sorry about that. I mean, I do need a citation for cockroaches never having evolved.
Shield bugs are the same, or stink bugs, as those we find in the fossil record.
Oh. Okay. Well, let's check with shield bug. We'll do the same thing, right? So, give me a second. We will do just the main monitor. Okay, so shield bugs. Shield bug. I'm not familiar with shield bugs. I know virtually nothing about them. All right, so let's see. Pentatomoidea. Pentatomoidea is a superfamily of insects in Heteroptera. All right, let's check Heteroptera. Let's see. Heteroptera is in Hemiptera, which is the order, so we'll get to the order. Oh, and we've got aphids and cicadas and things like that. Let's check. Let's see. Evolution. All right. I don't actually see a lot on here, so this actually may be an area where we don't have a great history for the evolution of shield bugs. So hey, maybe he found another one like bats, where we don't have a great record. That could very well be. But I know that's not the case for frogs. So let's see. Let's see what we get here. All right. I'm just checking a few things. Okay, that's what I was looking for. Tritobactrachus. All right. So, Tritobactrachus is a fossil frog. And interestingly, one of the things you'll notice is it has a postanal tail, and its fibula and tibia are not fused, like in modern frogs. So I guess frogs did evolve. Weird. Weird. It's actually not that hard to find a transitional frog. And yet here we get a frog that isn't. Why not go for Tritobactrachus? I can tell you exactly why. Because it would defeat his argument. That's why not.
Frogs are the same.
Can't have that.
Bats are the same.
We've already
And
covered
again,
bats.
I mentioned before, the first time a bat appears in the fossil record, it's a perfectly formed bat. There's no evolutionary history for bats. Lizards are the same.
What does that even mean? Lizards is a ridiculously diverse group. But also, you already pointed out that Tuatara, a rhynchocephalian, the sister group that is leading here, and no modern family of lizard is around when we get the first lizards in the Jurassic, right? And I don't even know.
Centipedes are the same as the centipedes we find alive today. Spiders.
We're just going to
Spiders
we've
are the
already
same.
covered these. We found Attercoppus, which definitely isn't the same. Like, he's just lying, right? If you cherry pick fossils specifically to look like ones that look like modern members of the same group, like, it's no surprise that you can find them. But again, he's doing it by ignoring the other fossils. It's the same thing that happened with Pete Greer in the video that I uploaded recently. I think it was like Pastor Can't Get Something or Other Right. It's the series. They each have a Pastor Can't Get Something or Other Right. Or doesn't understand. Yeah, Pastor doesn't understand, and then there's a thing, right? He went through the same thing. He's like, where's the evolution? And it's like, this being live, I don't have time to go into a full, in-depth thing. But each time it was like, well, here's an example of a transitional group, right? You just didn't pick it. You just didn't want to look at that one.
As those we find alive today. Flying ants are the same as those we find alive.
Spicomirma, transitional wasp ant.
Living snakes, turtles.
Odontochelys, Papochelys for turtles, others. Tetradophis for snakes, as well as others. I mean, like, it's not hard to find transitional snakes and turtles. Now, this wasn't the case, 30 years ago, but, I mean, welcome to the 21st century where we have more fossils. Hope you enjoy your stay. You might want to change out your wardrobe because it's hotter.
And snakes and turtles actually pose some additional problems. Turtles in particular, the shell of a turtle is so hard that it would be expected to be found in fossilized forms.
Okay.
Why?
Well,
What?
I mean, it is a hard part. It's mostly made of bone. I actually agree with him.
Yes, but why would we expect them more than other animals with, like, hard body parts?
We probably wouldn't expect it more, but I mean, let's see. We probably would expect a pretty good fossil record for turtles, and we actually do have one. In fact, we're going to check on it. So let's see. Let's take a look at Odontochelys. And we're going to... So we have Odontochelys. Odontochelys is a stem turtle that only has a plastron and doesn't have a carapace. Interesting. So we have that example here. We've got things like Papochelys. That has broadened ribs that form a hard sort of armor, but doesn't actually form a actual carapace. And then what was the one that has both the carapace and the plastron whose name I can't remember?
Seeing the highlighted rib bones like that reminds me of the body horror art that I sent you. What it would look like. For
You always
turtles.
make sure I see the most horrifying things.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So let's see, what was it? Please. Ninjamies. Although there is. So Ninjamies is an interesting animal because it is closely related to turtles, but it can't retract its neck, unlike actual modern turtles. Also, it had horns. So, I mean, like, there are transitional species for turtles. But whether or not it's a problem that's been solved.
Just like the clams, those bones and trees, hard things are
Wait, went from clams to trees? I don't know what the point was there.
expected to be found in fossil forms. This turtle shell is expected to be found in fossil forms, but
And we just saw that it was, including in transitional forms. But that's where we're going to start wrapping things up, because we have been live for almost 2 hours. Yeah, I think this has been getting worse. Going full-on Harun Yahya is really not a good idea, because it tips your hands at how hard into cherry-picking you are. Because what you would actually want to do, if you wanted to show that there was no evolution in a group evident in the fossils, is you would do a survey of all known members of the group from the fossil record, as well as things that are supposed to be close to that group. So you would want to do like, hey, how many animals are there in Pantestudinata, which are the things that are either turtles or close to them, right? And then you would say, okay, of these animals, do we see evident evolution of the turtle shell? And if we do, and I want to say that that's not what we're seeing, you're going to have to come up with reasons. Instead, we just get, hey, I'm going to cherry pick the most modern versions of this that are obviously fossils, because they're in amber or in rock, and then say, look, there's no evolution, even though that's mostly a lie. It's a dishonest tactic. It's transparently dishonest. The only person it's going to be convincing to is someone who's already on your side. But then again, I mean, young Earth
Well, that's what
creationism.
creationists are for.
Yeah, it's been inward facing for decades,
Yeah.
because they've made zero headway in overturning science. Shanti, are we going to see a video from you at some point?
Yes, you will.
Is that point near enough in the future that I should mention it?
No.
Okay.
But you're well within your rights to keep roasting me until I put it out.
Okay. Because, I mean, you've been working on it for a while. I want to
Well,
promote it.
life has been happening a lot.
Yeah, no, I know how that goes. Yeah. That is true.
Like, everything happens so much.
Yeah. All at once. Alright, well, guys, I'll give a quick overview of what's coming up. I've been alerted to the fact that I am almost at having my 500th video. So I am considering trying to do a 500th video special or something. So I think that's a significant landmark. And when I heard that that was coming up, I was like, gee, I've put out a lot of stuff.
You also hit 8K subscribers this week.
Yes, I a couple days ago, or maybe it was yesterday, I hit 8,000 subscribers. So thank you to all of you who've subscribed, which I assume is most of chat. If it's not you, hey, hit subscribe. It's free. You can undo it if you don't like it. And if you're already subscribed, turn on the notifications. Granted, YouTube sucks at notifications, but it's less sucky when you have them turned on explicitly than when you have them turned off explicitly. So, hit the notification bell. Other than that, I would give more another commercial for Patreon and whatnot, but that's going to be in the end credits anyway. So guys, I'm going to see. Let's see. So Tuesday, Kent with Bent is the next big thing. And I believe Thursday is going to be the second part of the Cindy Lincoln and stratigraphy video. And then on the 5th, there should be a speculative evolution video that comes out. I have no idea what, if anything, is happening on the 6th. Okay, according to this, 497 videos is where my channel is at right now. I have to double check if this is the 498th. Then that would make Tuesday the 499th, and then I would need to do something before Thursday if I wanted to do a 500 video special. So, if you have ideas for what you think a 500th video should be, let me know. Put it in the comments. All right, guys, we're going to get out of here. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you especially for chatting, especially for super chatting. I really appreciate it. And we are out of here.
What a
Thanks for watching, but before you go, I just want to say a special thank you to my channel members and my patrons, especially those pledging $20 or above. Bob Knob, Work in Progress, Benthoven, Cynically Skeptic, Denny5252, Ian Chen, John Ackerman, Landon Knoll, Yepetus, Mabdy Babdy, McSpooks, Sphincter of Doom, The Venerable Veed, and Patrick Dennis. As you probably know, YouTube is a very volatile platform, and from month to month my income on the channel can swing wildly. But the people you see on screen are directly supporting so that I don't have to worry too much about that, and the channel can keep going as it is, and perhaps even improving. If you'd like to join this team, there are links below to join the channel or in the description to join the Patreon. The Patreon starts as low as $1 a month, and the channel memberships start as low as $1.99 a month. On Patreon, you can even get a discount for pledging annually. If you do decide to pledge, you'll get access to an exclusive Discord server just for channel supporters, as well as early access to all of my pre-recorded videos, often up to 2 months in advance. Higher tiers will unlock even better perks. Now, if an annual or monthly pledge isn't right for you, but you still want to support the channel, there is a merch store down in the description, as well as an Amazon wishlist, just for me. And if financial support isn't something you can or want to do, then if you still want to help out the channel, please just like and share these videos and make sure you comment on them. It really helps the channel out. Thanks again for watching.